All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Successful Coach podcast. I am Michael Pacheco, your host. Um, I've got here with me Nikki Groom. Nikki has been hailed as a force of nature and a rising superstar. She's on a mission to help rising women leaders recognize their worthiness, own their own power, and amplify their impact without checking their integrity at the door, which is super important for me because my company's our value statement, the first thing in there is integrity. That's the very first thing we have listed. Nikki is the author of A Power of Your Own, How to Ignite Your Potential, Uncover Your Purpose, and Blaze Your Own Trail of Life and Business. It's a business brand and marketing strategist and the creator of Movement Makers Mastermind. Nikki, I appreciate the alliteration there. A small business growth accelerator for women entrepreneurs. Welcome to the podcast, Nikki Groom.
Thank you all. Thank you for that mouthful of an intro. I know you packed a lot in there, so I appreciate it. And so grateful to be here.
I just like saying Movement Makers Mastermind.
Yeah, right? Just
nice.
rolls off the tongue.
So Nikki, why don't we just start out? Just tell us a little bit about yourself. We'll start there.
Yeah, I mean, what do you want to know?
How about
I can start anywhere.
Why coaching?
That's a good question. It's funny because for a very long time, I felt drawn toward coaching, but I didn't know if I could do it. And now I know that I can do it because I've done it and I've worked with so many clients and got terrific results for them. And so the proof really is in the pudding, as they say. And I think much like most of my career and even moving to the States, things that I've chosen to do in my life have always been things that I've thought that maybe I can do and that I really kind of feel this pull to doing. And then it's basically been a wing and a prayer and let's see if this works. Let's experiment. I talk a lot in my book about experimenting with purpose and the fact that rarely do any of us have it all figured out. And oftentimes there's a certain amount of risk taking in trying something and being prepared to fail. So when I first started coaching, I guess I'd been doing it in some way, shape, or form for a really long time, but officially for the last few years. Again, in the beginning, really sort of worried about whether I could really call myself a strategist and a coach. And once you start getting those results in the door, it really does give you the confidence you need to continue.
So you mentioned that you didn't think you could do it early on, and then you found out that you could do it. Talk a little bit about that, because I think imposter syndrome is something that we all struggle with, but especially coaches, right? Because as a coach, your de facto position is that of a teacher, of someone with the wisdom to bestow upon others and help others grow and succeed. So talk a little bit about your struggles with that and how you overcame that, because that's a tough one, I think, for all of us.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked me about that because I do like to talk about the imposter complex. And I always say that the reason so many of us feel that way is because we're living in a world in which we've been told that we don't belong in high places or we don't deserve to have an equal amount of success. And so that's particularly true of women, but it does impact so many of us at different times. And depending on the kind of messages that we've absorbed over the years about who we can and can't be or what we are and aren't capable of. And so, when I look back at my entrepreneurial career, in fact, my entire career, there have always been times when I have decided to try something new and worried that I was a fraud. A friend of mine is actually an expert in the imposter complex and says, if you feel like a fraud, you definitely are not one, because real frauds don't worry about feeling like a fraud. Yep. But yeah, it's mind over matter. I know that sounds so simplistic, but I think that is a great way to circumnavigate the imposter complex, is just, I'm going to do this anyway, even though I'm worried about how people will receive this. And I'm just going to give it a go. I know that sounds, as I say, so simplistic, but that really is how I did it. And there's no there's no magic formula, really. What I have discovered, though, which is really, really interesting, I think one of my main concerns was that there are so many coaches out there nowadays. There are so many consultants. There are so many strategists. Like, who am I to, what do I bring to the table that's different that
Mhm.
somebody can't go to somebody else and get? And what I've discovered is that so many of us, and it doesn't matter if you're a coach or if you're in a different field. I work with a lot of entrepreneurs, but there's oftentimes that thought of, well, there's lots of other people who are just as qualified, or there are lots of other people who are doing this same thing, so why should I do it? And it's interesting as well, especially if you're really kind of getting clearer and clearer on what your potentially unique body of work or message is, and then you see somebody else come out with a book or a talk on exactly the same thing, and it's very easy to think, well, there's no point in me doing this now because someone else has already done it. So I think just a bit of a reality check in terms of having conversations with other people, realizing that so many of us do worry about this, and actually that belief that there's only a limited amount of business to go around, that not all of us can be successful is a lie. And so and unfortunately there's no easy way around. When I was writing my book, I went through similar doubts, thinking, who am I to write a book? Can I do this? And the self-discipline piece really was pushing forward regardless. And yeah, that was the hardest piece. And I think that's oftentimes the hardest piece of anything that we do, is just believing that we can do it. And that really is half the battle. Yeah.
Do you think part of it is like, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Amy Cuddy, but she had the big TED talk with body language and kind of like fake it till you make it. Do you think that plays a part in just having the courage to just dive in and figure it out as you go? Or
Yeah, I used to think it was fake it till you make it. And now what I realize is that I, over the years, have got really into mindfulness and meditation. And for the longest time, I would hear other entrepreneurs talk about that and think, yeah, that sounds great, but I don't think it's really for me. And it wasn't until I tried it that I realized that you can come to this place of a really deep understanding of who you are at your core and how
Mhm.
worthy you truly are. And so I always try and show up from that place. So if I'm leading a coaching call, particularly in those early days, taking the time to really ground myself, remind myself of what I've accomplished, what I know to be true in terms of what I'm capable of, and to show up from that place. That again, to me, goes back to the integrity piece, just always trying to show up as real, as authentic as I can, and from that self-empowered place of knowing that I have what it takes on a core level.
Love that. I love that.
Yeah.
Something that pops into my mind that kind of relates to this in terms of, it's a little bit kind of facing imposter syndrome. If you've ever read the book or seen the movie Catch Me If You Can, the main character in there, Frank Abagnale, um, the actual man, Frank Abagnale, was asked after he was caught, was asked how he was able to teach, MBA level sociology. He's not a professor. He just went in and did it. And he said, I just had to read one chapter ahead of the students. Kind of an
Yes.
interesting look at it. And it's just, you don't have to know everything to do this and to do it well.
Right. And I think that that is a false belief that we have to know, we have to have it all figured out, we have to have all of the answers. And actually the very best leaders are, they are comfortable with being vulnerable enough to say, hey, I don't have it figured out, I don't have all the answers, however, here's what my lived experiences have shown me, or here's what my research
Yeah.
has led me to believe. And that's very much how I coach. I do it from a place of, let's see what your gut's telling you and what you know to be true, and we can kind of maybe pair that with some of my experiences and come to an understanding that makes sense in terms of where you want to go, rather than saying, here's what you should do because I'm the only one that knows what's right for you, which just absolutely isn't the case. So yeah, I
Yeah.
definitely agree. And I think it's important. And one of the best things I ever heard is you teach what you need to learn. So again, there's that idea that all of us are human beings and we're imperfect and we're flawed and we're going to mess up and we're all works in progress. So over time, we're probably being constantly challenged to kind of get better and better in certain areas, having that growth mindset is so fundamental to coaching and to being a coach as well. And
Yep.
so if I think none of us could really be coaches if we weren't also doing the work ongoing. And so, yeah, I definitely love that idea of kind of, being a few steps ahead of the people that you're coaching, and also working with them to better understand, where they're intuitively being led, and to see if you can kind of map some strategy to that in a way that's really going to help them get where they want to go.
Love it. I love it. Do you have a coach?
I do. Yes, I do. Yeah.
Nice. Nice.
Yeah. I think it's
Um,
important. I think it really is
yeah.
important. I mean, I definitely will say that I am a bit of a rebel in that I oftentimes will slip into that mindset of thinking, hey, I got this. Like, I'm going to figure this out by myself. And so I will go through periods where I don't have a coach. And
Guilty.
ultimately I always come back to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because it's, you can second guess yourself, or sometimes I just feel like it accelerates the whole process of being in business for yourself or pursuing certain goals, when you can have that champion, that person in your corner who can be like, right, let's listen to what you want to do and where you want to go, and then let's break this down and let's make it possible. Let's create a plan. Oftentimes I think when we're trying to do things by ourselves, there's no one to necessarily hold us accountable except ourselves. And it can
Hmm.
be difficult. It can be very easy, the world that I travel in, a lot of the time I work with entrepreneurs who have a lot of clients, and it's very easy to kind of slip into just working with those clients and not working on their business. And well, no one will ever know if I don't do the thing that I really want to do to grow my business. So I think just having that accountability partner, and like I said, that supporter, that advocate, that champion who can just really help push you forward and move you along a little bit further than you and faster than you might go alone, is so invaluable. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. So, okay. So you mentioned having a plan and strategy. What does that look like for you when you start working with someone? Um, what is that? What does that look like in your world?
Yeah, again, I mean, I do work with executives as well, but most often entrepreneurs. Not that that matters, like the process is still the same. And so, one thing that I always love to start with is to not only go through a process of inquiry where I'm really just kind of uncovering what's most important to them in terms of their mission, their beliefs, their values, their commitments, the people they most want to serve, the impact that they want to have, the money they want to make,
Hmm.
but also taking time to really allow them to dream big and craft a vision for the future that they want to transform into reality. And then from that point, and I always talk about crafting that vision from a place that's unobstructed by their current reality. So we're not going to worry about money, resources, skills, or a dearth of them. We're just going to create this vision from a place of allowing yourself to really dream big. What is it that you want? And then we kind of bring that in. Oftentimes we'll go out, 5, 10 years, sometimes even further.
Wow.
And then we kind of bring that in. So it's like, all right, so what does that mean for you in terms of what you need to accomplish and what you need to get done in the next year to take you that one step closer to those goals? And then we keep bringing it in until they have a strategy week by week. They know exactly what they need to be working on in order to move themselves forward.
I love it. So you start really, really big and kind of reverse engineer the grand vision until they understand the task that they need to do tomorrow to take baby steps and progress toward that big grand vision. It sounds like.
Yep,
That's great.
exactly. And I think it's really easy, and I know from experience, to try and approach it from the other way. So you're kind of looking at your week and what do I need to get done this week, and that sort of head down approach where you're not kind of looking at the bigger
Mhm.
picture can get you into trouble. And you can get a year, 5 years down the line and think, well, how on earth did I end up doing this? Because this really isn't what I want to be doing. This isn't fulfilling to me. Big fan. There's a I can't believe I'm quoting Oprah in an interview. Oprah is great. She says there are no wrong paths. So
Huh?
even if you do find yourself 5 years down the road and you think, well, how on earth did I end up here? It's
Mhm.
okay. I'm sure it taught you something, but yeah, I think that it's so important in terms of, again, that idea of moving forward faster. And so often it requires slowing down first. So slowing down, creating space, getting clear on that vision, so that you can take that intentional next step. It just saves a lot of time in the long run. So I think people often skip past that step because it feels like it's taking too long, but it definitely saves time over time. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. And I'm very guilty of that. I know I have a couple coaches, and
Mhm.
I'm frequently asked to step back, breathe, look at the big picture, and think about it from that point. And because I think the other thing that does, so first of all, let me say that I'm definitely guilty of what you call the heads down approach, which is
We all are. We all fall into
looking
that.
in here and like, here's my to-do list, and checking things
Yeah.
off and feeling productive and feeling very busy. But perhaps my life is moving forward, but not necessarily, maybe it's zigzagging instead of just going directly for this goal. And
Right.
so I love the idea of that, really thinking about the big picture and doing it, making it a point to do it every so often. Because the other thing that I found for myself is that I'll get inspired when I wake up. There's
Mm,
mornings we all wake up and we kind of feel like shit, and we don't really want to do all the things that we know we need to do. And if I on those days, I find that if I take time to read my vision and think about it and kind of meditate on my vision a little bit and slow down, like you said, that inspiration will come and I'll start to get excited about the day again.
yes, I so agree. For me, that morning time is really important as well. And one rule that I have is that I always work on my most important thing, the project that is most important to me first of all. And
Mhm.
that oftentimes is related to those big picture goals that can often get pushed to the wayside.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know if you've heard of the time management technique where you kind of mark things off according to whether they're urgent and important, not urgent and important, not urgent. I'm going to screw this up, but anyway, you get the gist. Um,
Okay.
the Oh my goodness, yeah, there we go, yeah, yeah, that's it,
The
that's it.
highest priority is in the middle of the Venn
Yeah,
diagram, and then it's labeled off here. This is this
amazing.
is
Yeah,
this is up printed up on my wall over here.
yes, and so oftentimes what ends up happening is that we're in that urgent space, that doing that urgent work.
Yep.
And oftentimes that's client stuff. If we are, if we're a service-based entrepreneur, um, and the important stuff, the not urgent and important stuff, that's the sweet spot. That's the zone in which I try and start every day. That's always my intention. Like, let's start with that. Let me kind of play with some of these ideas. Let me get clear on what this piece might look like in the future and that kind of thing. So, yeah.
Yeah. I love it. That's great. Cool. So I would like to circle back for a minute. You mentioned earlier, trying to think about how you said it, but you mentioned that people will see, if they're working on something, and for instance, someone releases a book on the exact same topic, and you're thinking to yourself,
Yeah.
oh, why do I bother doing this? There's other people already doing this. There's other people ahead of the game. As a marketer yourself as well, I think you understand that th- what you can do. I think you can tweak that the way that you frame that in your head, um, and look at that as proof of concept, right?
Yes. I
It's
love
proof of
that.
concept. That means that
Yeah.
there's people willing to buy. There's a market for what you're doing.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And oftentimes, you can kind of get in that person's slipstream. So maybe they're speaking at events that you want to speak at, or they've worked with
Totally.
certain clients, or, I'm often, I think it's easy to kind of slip into that comparisonitis zone. But
Mhm.
if you can look at whenever I think I want to do something new, there's always a period of discovery where I'm looking at other people who are already doing that thing. I'm looking for their examples. I'm looking at their business models. I'm looking at how they charge. I look at how they market themselves. And then oftentimes I'm kind of integrating what I like into my own approach, which is
Mhm.
always going to be uniquely mine, but I'm definitely borrowing kind of other people's insights or ways of doing things, not copying by any means. But like you say, yeah, absolutely. There's proof of concept out there. And I think it can be easy to take a glass half empty approach and think, well, there's no point me doing that anymore, and kind of throw your toys out the pram. Or you can say, like you said, there's someone else doing that. So in that case, that means that I can do that too. And again, it goes back to that belief that there's enough business for all of us. And, of course, that doesn't always map out in reality. We won't get into kind of how things are structured in the real world. But yeah, I mean, in an ideal world, there's enough business for all of us. And so kind of being cutthroat and competitive rather than collaborative definitely isn't my approach. And, I've worked with some really incredible leaders and coached incredible leaders who have this amazing network who you might think was filled with competitors, but they share ideas, they support and uplift one another. And it's really cool to see that. So yeah, it's
I
not a
love
bad
that.
thing.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Okay, cool. So tell me about some of your biggest wins as a coach.
Mm. I well, I definitely get the warm and fuzzies when I think about clients who have come to me and really worried that they didn't have anything special or valuable to offer the world, or maybe didn't feel like a true CEO, and like they were
Mhm.
almost just like playing at being a business owner, and getting them to the place where their whole outlook had shifted and changed, and they were showing up differently and with so much more confidence and authority, and setting healthy boundaries, and just serving from a place of understanding that they get to have their needs met just as much as their clients need to have their needs met.
Mhm.
So that always gives me a tremendous amount of satisfaction. And then, of course, hearing the numbers, if somebody, a client of mine doubled their revenue and was surprised to discover that they had doubled their revenue, pleasantly surprised, or clients will double their rates and their business continues to thrive. So I love those stories, and I feel like the when you bring numbers into it, it gives you a real concrete sense of what's possible. Just increasing email subscribe helping someone increase their email subscribers into the tens of thousands, that the numbers
Mhm.
always carry so much weight when you're sharing with others. So those are definitely great. But I would say the behind the scenes stories that not everybody gets to witness, and maybe they just kind of get to experience the end result, but walking with someone as they go on this self discovery journey and learn everything that they bring to learn to understand truly everything that they bring to the table, and just how amazing they are, and yeah, kind of really tapping into what they want their unique contribution and impact to be. I love all of that work. It's really powerful and it's life changing. So that's definitely a highlight for me. Yeah.
That's great. There's um there's a guy in one of my coaching groups. It's kind of like a mastermind type coaching group. And he's the president of a largish manufacturing company in the Midwest.
Mhm.
And he came to the group, I don't know, a couple months ago, and they had more than doubled their revenue in the past year. And at the last board meeting with the board of directors, they asked him what he was doing differently. And he said the only thing that he's been doing differently is that he's been working on himself.
Yes.
It's crazy
Yeah.
how that when you can do that at the highest level, how that trickles down and affects everything that you're doing. And
Yeah.
really, it's a lot of that is that me time a little bit. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Totally is. I mean, that actually is. So when I started writing my book, I knew I wanted to write a book that felt really meaningful for me in terms of what I was sharing, and at the same time was helpful for me and for my business and for people to kind of understand what it is that I stand for.
mhm,
And now I have a big box of books there, but I won't, I won't grab one. I should have had one ready. Now, when I hold the book in my hands, I realize like it basically is a reflection of my entrepreneurial journey, which has been the biggest self development journey. Like, I don't think I would be the person I am today if I
mhm,
hadn't decided to start my own business. I hadn't, even just starting my own business and realizing everything that I brought to the table, and kind of growing in confidence in that way. I left like a terrible relationship. So that, that was a big life-changing piece. And then, as I say, just leaving the corporate world and thinking, I don't really even know who I am.
yep,
And just and also becoming very acutely aware early on that entrepreneurship brings up all of your stuff. So if you struggle with the imposter complex, or you have any negative habits or ways of thinking, like, you need to get over that pretty quickly, otherwise you're going to get in your own way. And so just being committed to making this work, and bringing awareness to areas where I needed to grow has just been incredible. And like I say, the work is never done, but I totally agree with that. I think it is a game changer when you can really become a self-aware leader and understand, how you show up, how you want to show up. And I think you can just connect with people from a more authentic place. And yeah.
It's difficult, right? It's not intuitive. It's not an intuitive way to do things.
And it's not convenient.
No.
So it's not like you can just listen to some kind of self-help cassette while you sleep.
Right.
Cassette. Wow, I just aged myself. But it's not like this. You can't do this overnight. Like, you have to be committed to working on yourself for the long haul, and also giving yourself a little bit of grace, because you're not going to figure things out overnight. And oftentimes, boundaries for me, particularly in the early days, was something that I often got tripped up with. I don't think I even really truly knew what it meant to set a boundary. And so oftentimes I found myself in a really disempowered place with clients. And that is something that I've really worked on and really, to a large extent, mastered. But oftentimes a situation will come about where I'm like, oh, here's the boundaries one again. I'm being put to the test again. And so I feel like those lessons keep coming back. Somebody once described it to me as like a spiral. So we're on this upward spiral, and we're going up. So things are getting better, but the same thing is kind of keep looping around. And it's like, oh, here we go. Here's this lesson again. I gotta refine my approach here and work on this part a little bit more.
Get little reminders.
Yeah.
Little life reminders.
Yeah, exactly.
So you mentioned boundaries a few times. That's a big part of. It sounds like it's a big part of kind of your style of coaching, is focusing on boundaries. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think really it comes down to communication. So communication is my jam. I'm naturally an introvert, so growing up very quiet, and my outlet was writing. So I'm really good at setting boundaries in writing, but sometimes haven't been as good in conversation when talking out loud with people. But yeah, I mean, it really comes down to communication. And again, my book is called A Power of Your Own. So this idea of owning your power, understanding that you get to have what you want. Like, you get to decide what you want, and you get to speak up for yourself, and you get to be your own biggest advocate. And at the same time, serving from a place of empathy and compassion for your clients, and understanding what their needs are, and kind of bringing those two pieces, bringing yourself to meet them in the middle. And I think that that's why it's all about the communication piece, verbal or written. You're always trying to marry the two in a way that's really, just really does you justice, at the same time as, being kind to your clients. No one has to be an asshole. And I think that that's why I really resonate with a friend of mine, Randy Buckley, has a program called Healthy Boundaries for Kind People. And I think there was a time when I used to think that if you set a boundary, you had to kind of be really bullish about it. And that's not the case at all. You can be very kind, but it really is about being kind to yourself, and just understanding what it is that you need, and communicating that in a way that makes the other person feel seen and heard and understood as well. So I think that that's, it doesn't matter what it is, whether someone's writing a contract, or whether someone's deciding whether or not they want to work with a client and potentially has to turn a client down. It really doesn't matter what it is. I'm always trying to help them marry both what they want and need and what their clients want and need. So yeah, and that's definitely boundaries, communication all day long. Yeah.
Love it. Okay.
Yes.
Interesting. I like that. Um, I kind of want. I want you to actually. I kind of want you to keep talking more about why boundaries are so important. I think that's a good one. This is new for me, and I'm interested in it.
Yeah. I think it's really about being assertive. And so I think that sometimes when and here's the thing, and I wrote about this in my book as well. Oftentimes we can tell when someone has stepped over one of our boundaries because we kind of feel a little resentful or maybe just like pissed off and maybe angry. Like there's negative emotions that rise up in us. And so the
Mhm,
first step is always bringing awareness to that. Like, oh, I'm feeling this way. Why is that? What has this person done?
mhm,
Um, and always assuming positive intent. So maybe they didn't mean to do this, or maybe they're having a terrible day, or let's give them the benefit of the doubt here. How do I communicate to them that I can't have this happen again in a way that is kind and really reinforces what's important to me and what I expect in this relationship, and ensures that they still feel seen and still feel valued and don't feel disregarded in any way.
yeah.
So it's yeah, that's really what it's about. Is that helpful? Do you have more questions about that? I'm happy to
So
answer them. So
what I'm curious about is why do you feel, I'm struggling to pick my words correctly here. Why do you feel it's so important for someone? Is it a
yeah,
matter of kind of self-respect almost?
it definitely is. Yes. So if
Where's the
without
growth? How do you grow from setting
yeah,
boundaries? How about that?
yeah, it's really the difference between going from feeling disempowered and having a disempowered mindset, which is one that's going to make you feel really crappy most of the time and resentful and kind of silently stewing because you're like, this person, like, why don't they just know what I need, and why would they do this to me, and I can't work with them anymore. It's just not a fun place to be. And oftentimes in that place we don't charge as much as we need to charge, or we allow clients to call us at all times of the day or night, or there's different ways that this shows up. um Someone breaks a contract, whatever it might be. That's going to be, and those things don't only happen when we're disempowered, but when they happen, when we're kind of in that place, they're more likely to happen when we're in that place.
Mhm.
And the way through is to really, that self-empowered piece, understanding, hey, I deserve I
Mhm.
deserve peace of mind. I deserve my quiet evenings in front of Netflix without being harassed, and finding it in yourself to communicate that clearly and
Mhm.
sometimes ahead of time. But yeah, just finding those areas where something feels off, and understanding that even though it's often easy to blame the other person and think, well, they should just know, they should just not do this, they should just not say that. Understanding that we absolutely have a role to play, and
Yeah.
we can communicate that in a way that, yeah, it's self-respect. It's about laying down those ground rules. Like, if we're going to be working together, I need you to know that I don't accept calls after 5 p.m. you know
Yeah.
um
And I
that
think
that kind
it's
of thing.
I think it's about setting expectations, right? Because
Absolutely, yes, yeah.
interpersonal breakdowns always come, in my experience, maybe I'm wrong, I'm open to being wrong, but they come from unmet expectations from one party or the other. And so
Yep,
being
yep.
upfront, setting clear expectations, yeah, I could see, I mean, that's just, if nothing else, it's just going to make life easier for you.
Yeah, definitely. And that's the great thing. Like, the more that you kind of play in this space, you can definitely kind of let people know after the fact if they've moved over one of your boundaries. But yeah, setting expectations is a way to do it ahead of time, because you're predicting, they may not know this about me, because different people work in different ways, and some people are really happy to take a call at 8 p.m. at night.
Yep.
But this is what's important to me. So I better let them know this up front, and then
Mhm.
we're both on the same page, and there's that mutual respect there. It's
Mhm.
also, there's been a lot of times in my entrepreneurial career where I felt sort of more like maybe the hired help, and didn't really feel like I had a voice. And maybe that was partly true, but at the end of the day, I always had the opportunity to speak up for myself and say what I would or wouldn't do, or what didn't work for me. So yeah, it's about self-respect. It's about setting expectations. It's about using your voice. It's about empowering yourself and giving yourself permission to create a business that really works just as much for you as it does for your clients.
Nice.
Yeah.
Tell us about some of your boundaries, if you would. What are some of Nikki Groom's boundaries when you're working with clients?
Mm. Yeah, the time thing is a big thing for me. So I'm not going to be available for you at all hours of the day and night. There
Mhm.
are set, particularly if I do quite a bit of consulting work in addition to the coaching. And
Yep.
so oftentimes we'll have a set number of hours that they pay for each week. And
Mhm.
so, I'm only going to do those hours and I'm going to sometimes I need to give them a heads up. We may go over the hours for this week, or we're just about at the maximum number of hours that I can give you. So just always sort of that is that communication piece, letting
Yep.
them know, setting expectations ahead of time, kind of letting them know that something might take longer than they perhaps hope it will, that kind of thing. With coaching, I would say that, uh, you know, again, making it really clear what the different communication channels are. Like you can email me anytime, or shoot me a note in Slack, and between these hours on these days, I should generally get back to you within an hour or something like that. So just
Sure.
making that really clear so people know when they can get a hold of me. Um, and again, uh, that's definitely a hot spot for me when I can't be all things to all people at the same time. And so
Mhm.
oftentimes, like if somebody is sort of acting in that way by pinging me in all the different places at all times and wanting things done immediately, it kind of rubs me up the wrong way. And so that tells me that sort of not great feeling tells me, Nikki, it's time to communicate. Like you need to set those expectations more clearly or remind them of how this works.
That's great. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's super important to own your time, to own your own time, right?
Yes.
Otherwise, if you
Yeah.
don't if you don't own your own time in some way, whatever that means to you, you're
Hmm.
constantly in a reactive state, and you
So
can't
true.
you
Yeah.
can't you're not able to work towards goals because you're just reacting to all of the things happening around you. Yeah,
Yep.
it's
Absolutely. One of my favorite books is called Essentialism,
sure.
and
Yeah.
they literally I'm blanking on the authors right now, but they literally say if you don't take ownership of your time, someone else will. And when I
Mhm.
read that, I was like,
Yeah.
oh. Like, it's so obvious when you read it. But yeah, that idea of like you get to take authority over your life. One of my favorite things to say to my coaching clients is you get to choose, because we often forget, we often lose sight of that, but you get to choose what your business looks like. You get to choose what path you take next. You get to choose whether you do or don't do this thing. And yeah, it's so true. Our calendars will fill with all manner of things. Oh, you had asked me an example of boundaries. So, and we had talked about how we structure our days. And I love to start with the most important thing, a bit of meditation, walk the dog, work out, start with the most important thing, and then move into my day. Well, if I have a day that's absolutely packed full of calls, I know that I'm not really going to get much done that's really truly important and that's going to move those uh, longer term projects forward. And so it
Mhm.
stresses me out.
Mhm.
And there's also, whatever I'm working on, I love to be in that kind of flow state, which is when I'm just in the zone, totally focused. And I can't do that if I have a call and then I might have an hour break, but then I have another call because I don't have enough time to really get in the zone. So
Mhm.
I'm much more regimented now with when I have my calls. So every week it's certain times on certain afternoons, and a couple mornings. And one thing I decided for 2021 is I'm not budging from this. Like
Mhm.
ideal work week. This is when I have my calls and that's it. And if people can't speak to me until March, they can't speak to me until March. And that's just the way it goes. And it's been great. It's been so great. And obviously there's a little bit of guilt with thinking, wow, you know, that person wanted to speak to me tomorrow. Of course, like sometimes there's going to be a bit of shuffling if it's something urgent, but for the most part, things aren't that urgent, and it's just as beneficial for us to speak in a few weeks as it is tomorrow. So yeah, that's one big change that I've made to my schedule. I went a little bit off topic there, I think. Or
No,
maybe I'm
no,
still,
no.
okay.
I think that's
Uh,
great. I mean, we were talking about,
yeah,
I had brought up the idea of owning your time. And so that's what you're talking about there. And it's funny
yes.
how when you, this is difficult for me as well. I own a marketing firm, and it's difficult for me to say no to my clients when they want to get on a call and talk about something.
Yeah.
And it's one thing that I've noticed is that when I give them my schedule, here's my schedule, here's my next available appointment.
Mm.
It's not tomorrow, it's next week or 2 weeks from now. Um, the world doesn't burn down. Life goes on.
Right. And
It's okay.
that's like an exercise in setting expectations as well, isn't it? Because
Yeah.
you can say, my calendar books up quite far ahead, so let's get some calls in the calendar now, so that we can touch base
Yeah.
on a regular cadence, and you don't have to wait for weeks before we can connect.
Yeah.
But
And I
yeah,
think
I do some marketing consulting work as well, and I know how that can go. and
yeah.
and it's frustrating because it's like, if I spend all the time, I remember that from when I was in the workplace as well. It felt like we had endless meetings and no work was getting done, and every meeting we would talk about the same stuff. So I'm like someone who just gets stuff done, and I love that freedom and that big chunk of time to really do that. And so yeah, it's definitely, it's a balancing act, right? But yeah, we have to take authority over our time, otherwise someone else will. Yeah.
And it really, it goes back to your the big grand vision, and you set this
Yes.
big grand vision, and part of that, right, that's like your ideal outcome in
Yep.
10 years or 5 years or whatever. And part of that ideal outcome is living that life, right? And getting to that ideal outcome, you need to be able to own your time to get there. And what I've found, for me at least, is when I do set those boundaries, I'm ending up with ideal clients,
Yes.
which get me closer to my ideal outcome.
Yeah, that's so true. And it's the same, if you find yourself discounting your services, I don't know if you found this as well, but oftentimes those aren't typically great clients. Whereas those who are just like, yep, that makes sense, that,
Yeah.
and they don't, haggle,
Yeah.
they often respect the work a lot more. Yeah.
If you can't if you can't be the lowest price in your marketplace, there's no value in being the second lowest. But there's huge value and huge advantage in being the most expensive.
Yes.
It's a
And so much of it
differentiator.
is positioning. Yeah. And a lot of my clients really struggle with that. They really struggle with the pricing side of things, particularly because they want to help people who maybe don't have the means to work with them. And so there's kind of all this internal conflict going on. And I always say, and actually, this is something that I heard another coach friend, Lena West, say many years ago, and it's never left me because it's such a powerful statement. But she said, you can't earn less so that someone else can earn more. And that was such a great reminder that it's important to charge what we need to charge in order to succeed. And a big part of that is just being financially taken care of. And yeah, I mean, if you can position yourself through your pricing to be the best at what you do, and you can walk your talk, then by all means do it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And you can take that into the realm of behavioral psychology. There are peer-reviewed studies that have been done that take, someone who receives a service for free, or someone who pays, $50 for a service, or someone who pays $5,000 for the service. And the person who pays the most for it will typically get the most out of it. They've done the same thing with table wine, right?
Mhm.
Depending on the price point, the wine tastes better the more expensive the wine is. It's the same bottle of wine.
Yeah.
So what I'm getting at there is that by charging more, you're actually doing a service to the people that you're serving. You're serving them
Yeah.
better because they're going to get more out of it.
Yeah,
And
I
that's
think
just
there's
human psychology.
Yeah, I definitely think there's something to be said for when you are investing in yourself. I always say, even when I'm on sales calls for my coaching services, I have very transparent conversations with people, and I never want them to feel pressured into coaching with me. We always have this really great discussion to figure out if it's a good fit, and if it is, then I will work with people on payment plans that work for them, especially if I do feel like we're really aligned and we are a really good fit.
Mhm.
But ultimately, I want people to feel stretched. I don't want them to feel too stretched that they're like, oh my goodness, why did I just invest in this? Because like I am not going to be able to pay my rent. I don't want anyone to go into debt
Sure.
just to afford that first payment, or the first few payments of working with me. But I do want them to feel stretched in a way that makes them want to show up fully, to do the work, to really be invested and committed in working with me to get the results. Because coaching is really all about it's so self-driven. And yes, I'm going to be there with you and guiding you and reflecting back to you the possibilities,
Mhm.
but ultimately you got to go away, you got to do the work. So yeah, that's really important. Yeah.
Love it. Love it. Um, so I want to be respectful of your time, but I've got a couple, maybe one more question for you.
Okay.
Can you tell me about your biggest failure as a coach? And if you want to reframe that as your biggest
Mm.
learning point, I'm okay with that. You can call it what you like, but where have you fallen? Where have you erred? And how did
Mm.
you reframe that? How did you reframe that in your own head and turn that into something, a point of growth or learning?
Yeah, when I think about making mistakes, and this is true of my whole entrepreneurial journey, is that when you are working for yourself, you might make a mistake once, but you very quickly course correct because you can't afford not to. So I welcome the mistakes, I welcome the learning. All I can think of is that I've my number one, I don't know if you've ever done the strengths finder test. My number one strength is strategy. I love big picture. I love kind of connecting all the pieces, connecting the dots. I love being in that zone. And what I've learned is that sometimes there's a difference sometimes between being a coach and helping people more with the mindset piece and being a strategist. So the strategist in me in the past has sometimes been bombarded with people with so many ideas and so many different things that they could do that it was too much for them. And what I've learned is it's really important to rein it in and kind of
Mhm.
give people one or two or maybe at most three things that you can really kind of unpack, work through with them, and then kind of give them to go off and put into action rather than overwhelming them. So, in other words, oftentimes we think we're helping people by giving them as much as we have. And that's the
Mhm.
same, I run coaching programs, I have a mastermind group, and I laugh because some of the first rounds I've been running it for the last few years, and some of the first rounds of the program that I ran, I packed so much in, it was ridiculous. And
Information
and what I
overload.
information overload, like people feel stressed out when you give them too much. They're trying to do all this other stuff. And so I've just learned to kind of really refine, distill things down to one or two core ideas,
Mhm.
so that I don't overwhelm people, and then they can really kind of take the things I give them. And I would say that totally in tandem with that is when I'm coaching somebody, allowing there to be silence and allowing there to be time to let things kind of sift and sit and percolate. So um, yeah, it's it can be tempting to want to do all the talking and throw all the ideas at somebody, but that's oftentimes not what's most beneficial for them.
Nice. That's great. I appreciate that. Cool. So it looks like you've got some limited spaces for one-on-one coaching. Do you want to tell our viewers slash listeners a little bit about that?
Yeah, definitely. I don't often put this out there. It's kind of like a behind the scenes little offer I do. But I am looking for people right now who are open to one-on-one coaching and really want that partner, as we've talked about, who can help them understand what it is that they bring to the table, what their unique contribution is, how they can have a positive impact either in their organization or in their entrepreneurial career. We really get clear on those things. We get clear on your vision, we get clear on your goals, and then we put together a strategic plan of action to get you there. So I'm always open to having chats with people who think that I might be a good fit for them and maybe want to explore what that relationship could look like. And probably the best way to get in touch with me is through my website, nikkigroom.com, or on social media. You can shoot me a DM on pretty much every channel and I'll see it. I'm at Nikki Groom pretty much everywhere because I keep things simple. But yeah, I mean, I would love to hold the space with some individuals who are really trying to take their leadership, their career, their business to that next level, and what that partner who will hold their hands, who will guide them through it and continue to reflect back to them their greatness and what they're truly capable of. So
Beauty. Nikki Groom, thank you for being with us. That's such an A-list name, Nikki Groom. I love that.
you think so? Oh, thank
It's
you.
great. Yeah, it's very like A-list Hollywood, Nikki Groom.
Love it. Thank you for saying that.
Thanks for being with us. I'm gonna pick up a copy of your book off Amazon. I'm gonna read it. My wife's gonna be excited to read it. She's
great.
starting her own telehealth business, so she's in the budding process of being an entrepreneur.
Perfect time to read the book.
Yeah. So awesome. Is there anything else that we missed, that I missed, that you want to chat about? Are we good?
I don't think so. I have a podcast myself. It's called the Movement Makers Podcast. So check it out. Be in touch. I'm very accessible. So shoot me a DM, shoot me an email, and I'd love to connect and chat.
Beauty. All right, Nikki Groom, thank you very much. And thanks guys for listening. Cheers.